We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to a new episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Wednesday night, October 30th, 2024, as we bring you a new episode. We are recording this show during Game 5 of the World Series, as the New York Yankees are trying to come back from a 3-0 game deficit. They blew out the Los Angeles Dodgers in Game 4, prolonging the 2024 Major League Baseball season for another night. But after recording, and despite being up 5-0 in Game 5, the New York Yankees blew that advantage, and the Los Angeles Dodgers came back to win 7-6 and winning the 2024 World Series in 5 games. Technically, the Chicago White Sox are not supposed to make any news, or any team outside of the World Series for that matter, until Halloween, October 31st. But as Scott Merkin of MLB.com first tweeted, the Chicago White Sox plan to hire Texas Rangers associated manager Will Venable as their next manager. What does that mean for the White Sox ball club in 2025 and beyond? Can Venable succeed with the current organization standing? Joining me to discuss the news and speculate what could come next for the White Sox is the managing editor of SoxMachine.com. It's Jim Margulis. On the eve of Halloween, I have to ask, as a father of a young child, because the trick-or-treaters are going to be coming to my house on Thursday night, and I hope they come because I bought a lot of candy, and I'm not keeping it all. What did Mini Margulis dress up for Halloween?
He is and will be, because we'll do like a little bit of trick-or-treating around the neighborhood, but he'll be going as, well, he's supposed to be a train conductor, except he doesn't like wearing the hat or the bandana, so he's basically like wearing a train in overalls. But yeah, he likes pressing the button, likes walking around for a little bit, and then he's done. So probably Halloween will last about 10 minutes, which is, fine. Neighborhood doesn't get a ton of trick-or-treaters because Nashville doesn't really believe in sidewalks or streetlights. So it's a limited window of time, but that's all right by me.
Does he like candy? Is there a specific kind of candy that he likes or that you allow him to eat?
No, I mean, we don't give him a ton of sugar, and he doesn't yet demand it. So we're just kind of letting that ride as long as we can. Is there a particular candy that you are hoping that he does get? I like the Midnight Milky Way. I think that's usually I'm a dark chocolate guy, and I never see those outside of Halloween fun size mix bags. So basically whenever there's a mix of candy, I tend to sort those out, throw them in the freezer, and save them for later.
I got yelled at by my wife, Kim, because one of the bags that I bought is nothing but peanut products. And she's like, what happens if a kid has a peanut allergy? They're going to sue us. So
Yeah,
I'm keeping that back for myself.
Usually they're pretty on kids or the parents of those kids are pretty on top of it to where like they'll go through it. Nope. But yeah, it's good to have a little bit of a mix.
Yeah, I got 2 versions of Reese's Peanut Butter Cups paydays. It just keeps going down the list. All the peanuts.
Yeah, just antagonizing those kids.
Well, we all hope you have a wonderful Halloween and have fun with the trick-or-treaters, whether you're passing out candy or going out with your family getting the candy. But looks like a little bit of a treat for the Chicago White Sox as they do go outside of the organization as they are planning to hire, as we mentioned in the intro, current associate manager of the Texas Rangers, Will Venable. Now, I say that because technically the Chicago White Sox have yet to send out the press release to officially announce that Will Venable will take over for the White Sox. But as Scott Merkin of MLB.com reported, even our own sources as well at Sox Machine confirming that Venable will take over as the next manager of the White Sox. Venable just had a birthday. He turned 42 years old on October 29th. Quickly, his resume. His coaching career started with the Chicago Cubs. He was, in 2017, special assistant to Theo Epstein. Starting the 2018 and 19 seasons, he was the first base coach for the Cubs. He moved over to third base coach in the COVID-shortened 2020 season. Then, in 2021, he was hired by the Boston Red Sox to be Alex Cora's bench coach, which he served for 2 seasons. And then when the Texas Rangers hired Bruce Bochy, in 2023, Will Venable became the associated manager of the Rangers, which he served in that role the last 2 seasons. Fun fact, in the 7 years as a MLB base or bench coach, Venable's teams have been in the postseason 5 of those 7 seasons. Only the 2022 Red Sox and the most recent 2024 Rangers have missed the postseason. Of course, Venable did win a World Series with the Texas Rangers, so he got that ring for the 2023 season. That is Venable's coaching career. Obviously, he played in the major leagues as well. So, Jim, your initial thoughts about the reported hiring of Will Venable as the next White Sox manager?
I would say it's fine. I think given the state that the White Sox are in, you can't get terribly excited about any managerial candidates. Like, you can't really inflate them with false hope because like you can only expect so much from the manager when you look at like how starved the lineup was for runs and how little immediate help is on the way. You can't expect him to like pick up a bat and start hitting. And if he did pick up a bat, he might be one of the 5 best hitters in the lineup, even though he's been retired for 7 years now. Like, that's just how dire it is right now. But when you look at the credentials, when you look at, the fact that he's been a member of a few progressive organizations or progressive managers, like he's been with Joe Maddon and Bruce Bochy, who are, old school and medium school. Like Maddon was new school for a while and then he became old school. But Alex Cora, he's usually on the cutting edge, or sometimes he goes over the line when it comes to seeking edges in information. And, the Red Sox, Rangers, Cubs are all well staffed in terms of their research and development and what their front office provides a team in terms of information. So I think, when I was looking at the managerial candidates and, there's Grady Sizemore, Phil Nevin, they were the ones who I was least enthused about, not necessarily because they were bad or because they were, lacking in some personal way. But I think what the White Sox needed to get most out of this was a manager who could say from the dugout, here's the information I had with the Rangers, with the Red Sox, with the Guardians, if you hired Craig Albornoz, whatever team that has really good pipeline from the front office to the dugouts in terms of, what their hitters need to know, what their pitchers need to know, what their pitchers and hitters are doing. He could show up to the White Sox in spring training and say oh, this is what you got. Or, with the Rangers, I had this. With the Red Sox, we had this, and this is really helpful. He might not be able to get that all in, day one. It might take a few hiring processes, like a couple winters for the White Sox to properly staff up. If Reinsdorf has the appetite to, really just build a true front office with a proper R&D department. But I think he's going to be well equipped to provide that the way AJ Hinch was supposed to do that for Rick Hahn. Instead, he got Tony La Russa as very much a top-down single decision maker, not a particularly collaborative presence in the dugout, which worked for him for the second most wins of any manager in Major League history. So, no knocking him, but it's tough for him to replicate. And then for any manager who isn't Tony La Russa, in this day and age, I think you really do need to have somebody who works well at the front office. So here's hoping that Venable will be that guy. I think, we all remember from Pedro Grifol's introductory press conference that he won the press conference and then very little else over the course of his White Sox career. So you can only do so much with track records, first impressions, mission statements, etc. But for the time being, I would consider him fine/good.
Yeah, I'm with you on the lessons that he's learned from Madden, Cora, and Bochy. I think that is important to bring to the White Sox because we are hearing that pregame planning for the Chicago White Sox is still an issue, especially for the hitters. And to have someone from outside the organization, thanks to Matt Spiegel of 670 The Score for this nugget of information, the White Sox relabeling the analytics department to the research and development department, the R&D department. So we'll reference that moving forward. Working with the R&D department to set up a better process for the White Sox players that they have currently on hand, so they feel a little bit more prepared on the opposing pitchers, or at least the opposing game plan is going to be, I think is a step forward. Now, talent is still going to be an issue, of course, Jim, but at least if Venable could come in and accomplish that in his first season, taking what has worked with the Cubs, the Red Sox, and the Rangers in recent years, and just have the at least hitters be better prepared for what is coming to them, then I think they could gain some extra wins or at least look better offensively. Because again, this was the worst White Sox offense easily in our lifetime and easily ever since the DH was introduced to the American League.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Venable and how he is as a presence in the dugout, I think, that will be perhaps the easier part for him is, relating well to a front office. He is a Princeton grad, which I think is part of the reason why, or at least I'm not sure if he graduated from Princeton, but he was a Princeton product as a player, and he's gotten postgraduate degrees, or at least, he went back to his degree from North Carolina. So I think he speaks the languages of the front office, which I think is why he's been a popular candidate for various teams. And the Guardians, Mets were on him last year, and the White Sox and Marlins were on. I mean, the White Sox and Marlins are basically the two only vacancies once the Reds hired Terry Francona, which good for them. Like I said, natural. There's no knocking hiring Terry Francona. So that's good. But, for the two vacancies, he was a finalist for both of them. So he has had some heat. And I think it's because probably he relates the front office pretty well and the language they're speaking and what he expects from them. I imagine there's a reason why the Cubs recruited him as soon as he retired to be in a front office role of some kind before they found a coaching spot for him. And so that's, I think, the less of my concerns. I think, as we've seen with the White Sox, for a couple managers, but it's particularly Pedro Grifol, is I think, the one question I would have in the interview process is say you have three players who are all making 8 figures and all woefully underachieving, how do you handle that? Can you name any experiences you've had either watching it, delivering messages, that sort of thing? I think that's going to be the trickier part, a little bit easier now because Andrew Benintendi might be the only hitter who fits that mold, and for the second half of the season he was fine/good. So perhaps with Jimenez out, Moncada out, a real lack of 8-figure players, maybe Andrew Vaughn might be the closest to what do you do with this guy if he's not hitting in a certain role. But that should be easier. The clubhouse mix should be easier. There should be fewer entrenched players to have to mind or risk losing the clubhouse over. But I think that's going to be my biggest concern is just when you lose 121 games, in all the baggage from that year. The clubhouse held together pretty well, by all accounts, but still, when you have so many players playing for jobs and so many players who might be reaching the end of their line, how do you turn over positions without alienating people or alienating people who like those people? So that's, I think, going to be the tougher task. But I think in terms of, R&D, like you said, relating to that, I would imagine that's his strong suit and why he's been a popular candidate for a couple cycles now.
I just hope, my concern is that the White Sox R&D department lives up to the standard that Venable has been used to with the Cubs, Red Sox, and Rangers, right?
Yeah.
Can they get the data that he is seeking?
I think, right now with where the White Sox are, it's not so much a matter of getting it right away. It's more of a matter of asking the right questions and knowing where the deficiencies are. If the White Sox try to staff up the way the Dodgers or Rays are staffed up, hiring 40 people, how would you even know how to range them? How do you even know what anybody's doing, what anybody's strong suits are? So I think it's going to take a 2 or 3 years to really properly not even catch up, but even get to the middle third of what teams are doing. And I think it's probably more a matter of Venable being a good check in the dugout saying, there's some improvement here, but still here's how the Red Sox are doing it better. Here's how the Rangers were doing it better. And being somebody who kind of understands what it's supposed to look like as an end user and help refine the process above him.
One of the biggest questions when speaking with people just who cover Major League Baseball or are part of baseball is why now for Venable, Jim? Looking at the lens of Will Venable, why are you deciding to take the White Sox job after declining permission to interview for the New York Mets and Cleveland Guardians jobs last year? And obviously we know that both the Mets and Guardians made the postseason. Not only did they make the postseason, both teams made the championship series. And Venable, it's not that he even got an offer for those jobs. He just simply declined to even go through the process because he was happy being in Texas. So that is a lingering question, Jim. Do you want to take a stab at it? Do you have any early speculation on why Venable has decided to take this White Sox job?
Well, I think the first thought was that he was going to be the heir apparent for Bruce Bochy. Bochy on a 3-year contract, could be approaching retirement at the end of next year. If he wanted to do it, but maybe he doesn't want to do it. So maybe it was a case of thinking he's on a certain timetable with the Rangers, and all of a sudden he isn't. So that's one reason why he wouldn't do it, or why things have changed from last year to this year. Another thing might be that he's coached in Chicago before. He was with the Cubs for a few years. Maybe he really likes Chicago. Maybe it's a place where he's comfortable moving. If he didn't have any natural ties and figures I'll have my choice of locations, could be a case of I want to move to Chicago. I liked living there. I have favorite restaurants. I have favorite neighborhoods. I have friends, contacts. It's a comfortable place for me to be. Cool. I want to go back there. And, as somebody who loves Chicago, yes, I'm all for that, reason. Could also just be a case where, he was with the Rangers and they're about to win a World Series and, perhaps was preoccupied with that, wanted to see it through, wasn't so much enamored with the Guardians and Mets to where it was the right time for him to do it. And after achieving the top goal of any major league team and winning the World Series, maybe his mind was a little more clear to take on challenges. Maybe it's a case of just realizing that you can't possibly be any worse than Pedro Grifol was. And so it's a really low bar to clear for a first-time manager. I think there are a handful of reasons. Most skeptical be he overplayed his hand and, thought he was going to be the Rangers guy. The Rangers like somebody more. And, whether it's Bochy or whether it's somebody else, not feeling like it's guaranteed anymore, has to settle for a lesser job. But I think, scarcity comes into it where, they're always, there are only 30 jobs. So while you can pass things up to a certain amount, if you play too hard to get, perhaps you're the guy who never wants a job. And so that becomes a check against you in the hiring process. You always hear about this, guys don't interview well, or, he doesn't want it the way others want it. And so, I think you do have to be mindful of that in a reputation-based business. So, those are among the reasons, and I imagine it'll be among the first questions that he gets during his introductory press conferences, like why this White Sox team, what happened with Cleveland and New York. And I'm curious to see how he'll either answer it or how he'll spin it, because there are some reasons, good and bad, or like, flattering and unflattering, why it could happen. And, it's, but I think the scarcity of Major League Baseball is such that after a while, you do have to make a decision, unless you are somehow like, a Nepo baby of some kind, of where like you feel like, your dad will hire you as a general manager at some point, as long as you, meet certain credentials. Like, I think it's a case of, you can maybe go through a couple cycles, but then eventually, like if somebody offers you a job, assuming it's, it's made with good faith and you feel good about the people you're working for, then I imagine there's a pressure to take it.
Yeah, I think in an upcoming episode, once the news has been official, I'm going to reach out to someone who covers the Texas Rangers, because I'm with you. Maybe after Chris Young getting his contract extended after the 2024 season, because he was playing out as the president of the Rangers out his contract, and he didn't have a secure deal for 2025 and beyond. But now that has been settled, I wonder if Young will try to keep Bochy long-term. One source that was helping us gather information of who the White Sox were interviewing mentioned that, to your point, instead of Will Venable being the heir apparent to Bochy, that Donnie Ecker could be that heir apparent now. He was the quote-unquote offensive coordinator, one of the Rangers bench coaches, and he decided ultimately to stay in Texas thanks to Evan Grant of the Dallas Morning News. And Venable was, according to this source, was encouraged by the Rangers to go through managerial interview process. So maybe didn't have as long-term of a future with the Texas Rangers, that if he did want a chance to be manager, it was probably a better chance outside of Arlington, Texas, than staying with the Rangers. So at first I thought maybe he was like the Rangers' Joe Espada, that when Bochy's done, it's easy. Venable takes over, like Espada took over for Dusty Baker. But not the case, because Venable is going to be the guy for the White Sox.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like, to check you have the tickets in your wallet first before you drive 2 hours to the big game. Seriously, you had one job. Now the closest you'll get to the 50-yard line is parking lot D. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
This episode is brought to you by Atlassian. Atlassian makes the team collaboration software that powers enterprise businesses around the world, including over 80% of the Fortune 500. With Atlassian's AI-powered software like Jira, Confluence, and Loom, you'll have more time to do the work that matters. In fact, Atlassian customers experience a 25% reduction in project duration per year. Unleash the potential of your team at Atlassian.com. Atlassian.
Well, what's funny learning about Venable, Jim, is he's a big Rick Renteria guy. And on multiple occasions mentioning how much Rick Renteria has influenced him and how much he's admired Renteria. So the first part is, because here's Venable joining the White Sox when they have lost 121 games. Could he suffer a similar fate as his guy Rick Renteria? Because Rick Renteria inherited a bad White Sox team that went through a rebuilding phase, and when they were turning the corner and they made the postseason in 2020, even though it was COVID shortened, after butting heads with Rick Hahn asking for reinforcements to give them a better shot of winning, he gets fired by Rick Hahn. Could Venable suffer a similar fate? Like, he helps the White Sox over the next 4 years turn the corner, and then bam! decides it's time to get the guy to lead us into the postseason.
It could. I mean, that's always the risk of taking a job like this, is like, it's really hard to be a Brandon Hyde who is able to absorb multiple 100 loss seasons and stick it through. Like, Renteria did his job, like did the job asked of him when he was hired. But then, between the way that team kind of fell apart at the end of the 2020 season, and like you said, Renteria wanting reinforcements when Hahn didn't give them, and I think just the baggage of those losing seasons. Also, like given 2020 with some distance from it, who knows? Like maybe it's a case of just people being at wit's end in 2020. Like perhaps just the stress of living then, perhaps made fuses shorter, because, that is a legitimate thing. Like a lot of people are just, chronically unhappy, and there are some lingering effects of that. So you never quite know when it comes to taking that 2020 season and interpersonal dynamics from that year, how much that factored in. But I think, from what we know so far, and I guess differences at this point would be that there wasn't a formal hiring process to pick Renteria after Robin Ventura. The White Sox thought they did it when they hired him as a bench coach for Ventura in Ventura's final year in 2016, and just said like, yeah, you're a guy. And we know a lot more about the White Sox convoluted chain of command and who was really in charge. And not only Kenny and Rick not seeing eye to eye, or Kenny overruling Rick, but the assistant GMs who reported to Kenny and Rick, Kenny's son and Jeremy Haber butting heads and having like turf wars. You never know exactly just how healthy that process was and who Renteria was actually talking to, or like who he was supposed to get answers from. So the idea with Chris Getz being the single decision maker, and you can take that with a healthy amount of skepticism, because Jerry Reinsdorf loves complicating things with just his dual loyalties to people who report directly to him. But taking him at his word, or not seeing any obvious conflict yet, that I think you would say Chris Getz is the guy. And so like if Chris Getz interviewed a bunch of people with Josh Barfield and had a really healthy pool of candidates externally because of some external people he had hired, Barfield and Brian Bannister and whatnot, that it should be a well-rounded enough pool. And you would think that the lines of communication would be a lot more direct. And you hope that creates a healthier starting ground for Venable. I still think it's like years away from this being a conversation, but trying to reverse engineer Renteria's, the end of Renteria's tenure and what might have been the causes for that from day one, I think some of those elements are no longer here, at least lying dormant.
So here's my fun question to follow up on Renteria. If Venable asked Chris Getz that he could bring back Rick Renteria as his bench coach, do you think Chris Getz should let him?
Yeah, I mean, my question would be like, why would Renteria do that? Coming back to the same organization in a lesser role, the same role he had before. Like, that's my bigger question. But I don't, Renteria did a fine job in this stage, especially helping players play hard and develop, and giving them ample ground to make mistakes, but also having some, enforcing a level of standards for a White Sox player. The teams weren't good, but the effort was good. The mistakes were fewer as time went on, and he got them where they needed to go. It all fell apart in the wild card series against Oakland, but that was him managing a bullpen game, which he never wanted to do ever. And, the White Sox didn't help him, get more than one starter at the end of that season. And so that was basically he had to try to address a weakness on the fly. But I think Renteria, if you're talking about him as even if he's not with the White Sox, if he's somebody Venable has occasionally talked to, or at least, he's part of the coaching tree, I think, of Renteria, or at least, he's been among coaches who have been influenced by Renteria and see him as like a positive role model of what they should be, or some things they should emulate as somebody who runs a team. Like if Venable has the occasional phone call or text with Renteria saying like, hey, how do I do this? Or, hey, what's up with this guy with the White Sox? Like, I imagine Renteria would be a valuable resource in terms of both navigating a pure rebuilding trajectory, and also some members of the White Sox front office, because it hasn't entirely turned over and there's still probably some residual weirdness he has to deal with. And so I imagine like somebody who's been there before on both fronts would be somebody valuable. So even if he isn't with the White Sox, perhaps he's somebody who does influence Venable in some way if they are direct, if they have like direct contact versus somebody who's learned from Renteria.
Hopefully we do get more insight from the Chicago White Sox when they do make this news official in the press release, if they also announce what other coaches are going to be part of Venable's staff. Maybe that's something that they're currently working through right now. Through sources, I've been told that the expectation is that Grady Sizemore is still going to stick around with the White Sox. I think we all assume that, Jim. Even when Sizemore was made the interim manager, and even though he was enjoying the job more and more and more as the days progress in that role, we were still expecting Grady Sizemore to stick around with the White Sox because he's well-liked.
Yeah, and Josh Barfield said too, like that that Sizemore can use his managerial experience for his next role, whether it's a coach, manager, or even in the front office. So he was under contract for another year. Even if Venable has like more say in building his coaching staff than previous White Sox managers have had, maybe there isn't a spot for Sizemore on the staff, but maybe the White Sox still want Sizemore in the front office as a special advisor or like a roving guy, something like that, to be still involved. So that's why I think like that, missing, or passing up Sizemore or hiring him as a manager at this point when they're probably going to employ him under some role anyway would be a little bit misguided.
But the White Sox do need hitting coaches. Mm-hmm. And many teams have 2 hitting coaches these days. So Venable, I'm assuming, will be part of that process in finding hitting coaches.
Yeah, Marcus Thames is still theoretically employed.
Is he?
But they were using Mike Gellinger as the assistant hitting coach, who is just somebody to plug in. So like at the very least, they need one hitting coach. But I would hope that Venable, if he really has a strong preference, especially given that the Rangers had entirely different hitting setup for developing hitters, like I would hope that he would have say in saying, like, if he has no connection to Tim's or wants somebody else, that he has the leverage to say like, nah, I don't want him.
Oh, it's right. That's right. Because Jersley stepped in as the third base coach. I'm getting this mixed up. I'm sorry, podcast listeners. So maybe Venable, they could stick with Jersley at third base coach if Venable wants, but Venable could be looking for a new third base coach, a new assisting hitting coach,
bench coach. Now, on the pitching side, again, it might be up to Venable. This is, again, speculation. We don't know. I have not heard anything from any sources, whether internal or outside of the White Sox organization. Do you, Jim, want Ethan Katz to come back as the pitching coach? I'm, I guess, ambivalent to it. I don't think his resume is that strong. However, the reports have been pretty positive. People around the game seem to have a favorable impression of him. And if the White Sox are overhauling their analytics departments, like a real true research and development department, I wouldn't mind seeing what Katz can do if he has like real help behind him, or if like there's more input before pitchers get to him. Because one of my concerns with Katz when they hired him was like, yeah, impressive resume, has been in the right places, has some success stories already with Lucas Giolito, talks the talk in terms of a modern pitching coach and what the pitching coach uses. But is he the only guy doing that? Is he, are the White Sox handing him like a whole bunch of ingredients and saying like, here, fix everybody on the fly, be the one, in charge with maintaining everybody, including 5 pitchers you just met? And is that stretching him too thin the way like Don Cooper had been stretched too thin in some years by saying, oh, just teach all these guys a cutter, you'll be fine. Like, so that's why, I can understand if people are not impressed by Katz, but I would say I might want one more year, especially since like Brian Bannister is there. Brian Bannister and Katz work well together. I would like to see a little bit more in terms of what Katz or what a White Sox staff can do with Katz and as a pitching coach. If like everybody involved, especially on the player acquisition side, is getting better information and having a better idea of like, whether a pitcher is doing something wrong with another team that they can fix, or whether something is undervalued with another team that they can bring more out of them. Like things that other teams are pretty good at doing. Like maybe the White Sox will be good at that in a year or two with a little bit more help before the player even gets to Katz and Bannister.
Yeah, I guess for our podcast listeners and for those that visit us daily on SoxMachine.com, I'm preparing for either there's a lot of carryover in the coaching staff, minimal additions, maybe a new third base coach, a bench coach, an assistant hitting coach.
Yeah, I would say like first base coach, like Jason Bourgeois. Like I don't know if he would be considered safe.
Well, that's
like,
going to be the next thing. Like, it could be a complete overhaul.
Yeah.
Like, I'm mentally preparing as well, and I think everyone should mentally prepare. The White Sox just shocking us and being like, yeah, Will Venable needs a brand new coaching staff. Like, we are starting complete scratch.
I'd be all for it. Like, yeah, I mean, like the White Sox did not do that. Like they didn't do that with, like, that's what I think one of the, not regrets of the Renteria era necessarily, but like I think one of the ways that Renteria was shortchanged a little bit was being stuck with Don Cooper and like the diminishing returns of the Don Cooper era. And then, as soon as, the Sox are done with Cooper, like Renteria goes out with him too. Like he didn't get to pick his own pitching coach. He didn't get to even like benefit from the front office picking a more forward-thinking pitching coach who might be better equipped to have success in the 2020s. So that's why I think like, if they did turn over the entire staff, like basically fired everybody and let Venable pick his entire staff, like, sure. I think that'd be healthier than having a staff that's like half and half, like the way that Rick Hahn allowed Grifol to bring some people over, like Mike Tozar and Eddie Rodriguez, but then like hired Charlie Montoyo almost before Grifol and said like, this guy's going to be your bench coach. Like, all right. That seems a little bit weird and out of order. And then Montoyo gets fired with him. It just seemed weird. And like Mike Tozar being like the guy who was supposed to be the coach who helps Grifol be elite at game planning. And then like a year later, he's demoted to assistant hitting coach. Like it was just weird and jumbled. And I don't know if it helped. I imagine it didn't, especially since like the White Sox fired all of Grifol's guys and then like just replaced them with roving instructors and people who had been around the rest of the way. So like I would take an entirely new staff as a healthy sign, even if some coaches need to be swapped out. But I would hope that, if they do want to retain Katz, I think he's probably the most, or like there's the best argument for him because, of the connection with Bannister and the strides he did see with some, especially like, like a story like Sean Burke being like, great out of nowhere. And like, oh, that's cool. Like Davis Martin, Jonathan Cannon, like the strides that they made. And thinking like, okay, these two guys working together, that's a pretty good setup for me. I'll take your advice on the pitching coaches and stick with them. Thanks, Chris Getz. Like if that's his attitude, cool. If it's we are installing Chris, you're taking this job and we have Ethan Katz and Brian Bannister no matter what, or I should say like Ethan Katz no matter what, because I think Bannister might be more of a front office hire than a Venable hire. Then I would say like, it's a little bit weird, or I wonder if that's going to lead to distrust, or if it's not working, will Venable be able to make the changes he needs? So that's after the why Chicago instead of Cleveland and New York question, I think my next question would be, for Chris Getz saying, how much autonomy will he have in hiring his own coaching staff?
An excellent question. We'll see. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts that are listening in the comments section about the coaching staff and what direction you want the White Sox to take with the rest of the coaches, especially when it comes to Ethan Katz. Do you want him back or not? But the White Sox got their guy. They have Will Venable to take over as the next manager. Still a long road ahead. So we'll see, and I think we all need to exercise patience with Will Venable. This is a much different situation than Pedro Grifol. Pedro Grifol was hired to come in with an 81-81 team and to get a veteran roster to play up to their projected 50 percentile rate and see if they can squeeze out a couple more wins. Instead, that clubhouse tore itself apart. They lost 20 more games. And then the next season is a season that we all just endured, which is 121 loss.
They lost
season.
20 more games.
They lost 20 more games.
They kept losing 20 more games.
I don't think Will Venable's going to lose 20 more games, but this is a completely different situation.
21 and 141.
Let's not challenge that, Will. Much different situation than what Pedro Grifol was walking into with the Chicago White Sox. Also a much different situation than when Rick Renteria was handed the job after the unclarity of what the heck happened with Robin Ventura and the White Sox after the 2016 season. This seems normal. It seems normal, which, bless up, we're finally watching the White Sox be a normal baseball organization. So cap tip to Chris Getz and the White Sox staff. Lots of candidates. They did their process, is very thorough, and they found their guy. Hopefully it does work out for everybody's sake, but we're still a few years away before the White Sox are in contending shape. Before we sign off on this podcast, a couple of things to promote. Again, the offseason plan projects are still ongoing. So now with the White Sox going with Will Venable, you can come up with your offseason plan project on how to help Will and the 2025 White Sox and what you want to target this upcoming offseason. Definitely think about trade ideas when it comes to Garrett Crochet, especially with how this World Series has been playing out, and leveraging that potential trade of Crochet to help find newer core pieces for the White Sox to continue their rebuild. Also, for existing Sox Machine Patreon supporters, we have a town hall, our annual town hall, coming up this Monday, November 4th, starting at 8:30 p.m. Central Time. We will be having a Zoom. I have already had a post on Patreon about this. There's a Google form that you could fill out if you would like to be part of the town hall live. We will be recording the town hall and uploading the video into our Patreon. We have some site news, some major site news coming up that we will be working on during the off season. So again, the Sox Machine annual town hall is going to be happening on Monday, November 4th at 8:30 p.m. Central Time for Sox Machine Patreon supporters. If you are not a Sox Machine Patreon supporter, you can go ahead and sign up at patreon.com/Sox Machine. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. And again, we look forward to your guys' comments and additional thoughts about the upcoming hire of Will Venable as the next White Sox manager. You can subscribe to the Sox Machine Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. You can also listen and watch the show on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Sox Machine, and follow us on social media. We're on all the platforms at Sox Machine. You can follow our Sox Machine beat reporter James Fegan at JR Fegan. You can follow me at SoxMachine_Josh. The Sox Machine Podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com. You're on for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.